Welcome into episode 123 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Nicholas Tacek.
One story today, with lots of little stories nestled inside, and then another story, it turns out, because long-time listener, FaceTime caller is story number one, and Facebook is just so Facebook. Time to hit the checklist. Brought to you by SecureMac. For a lot of people, the word privacy is synonymous with the name Apple. That makes the FaceTime bug that exploded on the scene Monday afternoon embarrassing at the very least. Actually, it's more than embarrassing. It posed a serious privacy risk. A number of sites, including Mac Rumors, had word of the bug, which let users connect to someone and hear their audio even if the person being called didn't answer the phone. I'm going to tell you the steps, not because you should try it, because you shouldn't try it, and besides, it doesn't work anymore. But you should see how easy it was. These are the steps, according to Mac Rumors. 1. Initiate a FaceTime call with someone. 2. While the call is ringing, swipe up from the bottom of the display. 3. Tap on the Add Person button. And then 4. Add your own phone number when it asks for the number of the person to add. Adding your own phone number to Group FaceTime a second time caused the call between both parties to connect, according to Mac Rumors. The site went on to say that you can hear the person on the other end and they can hear you, even though the call wasn't accepted. Now, I did try it with a friend of mine before it was, I want to say broken, but I guess before it was fixed. I did try it with a friend and with permission, and yeah, it did work. I was able to hear her side of things without her answering once I added myself to the conversation, and she was able to hear me. Now, normally Augustrometer is here with me, but things you said, Mr. Tacek, in the chat that we were having made me want to drag you back behind the microphone. Plus, we've talked before about issues reporting concerns to Apple, which really plays into this story fairly big. These are all things that we're going to get to. On the way, though, I'm trying to figure out the best ways to exploit this. Again, not because I should. Nobody should, even if you find a way. And again, this one has also been, sort of curtailed. But if I call someone and they decline the call before I can add myself, I can't listen in. So that was the first thing. Like, if calls went the way they normally do, then it wouldn't have worked. The way it seems like it could have worked were either somebody's ditching a call by letting it ring rather than declining it, which gives me time to add myself to that call, or somebody's away from their phone, when I initiate the call and doesn't know that I even tried to connect, which would give me the ability to add myself and listen in without their knowing. Is there another obvious scenario that I'm missing?
No, that was pretty much it from what was actually publicly stated with this particular exploit. I know there are a number of security folks looking at other ways to possibly trigger the end result, which is listening in on somebody else's phone without their knowledge or consent. Apple took down the Group FaceTime server-side component. They shut down their side of things, but they're going to have to be issuing patches for both macOS and iOS to update the client side of things, because that is most likely where the bug actually is present.
And I guess, too, initially I thought, okay, this sounds bad, but it's fine because I've got my phone with me. I'm going to look down with my phone and see, because, that was the other thing. It looked like your phone was still trying to make that call connect, even if you had gone ahead and run this exploit. But it's not just about the phone. Group FaceTime, that's the cool thing theoretically about Group FaceTime. It works on your iPad. It works on your it doesn't work on an iPod Touch, I don't think, or maybe it would have, but it works on your Mac. It works across all of your Apple ecosystem, basically, the watch not included. So it's scarier, not just because, just because there are so many different devices and you could be away from all of them, but somebody could be listening in. I guess, how does this happen? Is there like a feature that, could accidentally enable this? I mean, what is it? How does something like this happen?
Here is the working theory. To backtrack 1 second beforehand is just Group FaceTime has kind of had a bit of a rocky rollout. It was announced a number of months ago at WWDC, I believe, and then it was not present at launch for iOS 12. It was something they added with the 12.1 update, I believe, and that is kind of, it's not normally like Apple to announce something and then miss their launch window, but that's happened a bit lately between that and AirPower and, the AirPod charging case and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But in this case, it looks like it probably needed a bit more time in the oven. The most likely working theory right now is that it has to do with how FaceTime handles a switch from what's considered a one-to-one conversation into a group conversation type format. What would happen normally when you're doing like a one-to-one FaceTime call is it says, somebody's trying to call you. Do you want to accept? Yes or no? Just like a normal phone call. But say you're chatting with two people and you want to add a third person. You wouldn't want it prompting the initial two people, hey, do you want to accept this call? Because, hey, we're already talking to each other. We don't want to have that alert show up again and have to have everybody say, yes, I want to keep going with this call. You just want it to just work. So most likely what's happening is when FaceTime is seeing a call that it's considering switching from a one-on-one to a group situation, it's just saying, oh, yeah, okay, these people are having a group chat and, they were already talking, so everybody should just be unmuted and the audio and potentially video should just go like it's supposed to. It should just work. They're missing that step that checks to see if the first person actually accepted or declined the call in the first place. And that is obviously a problem here. And adding something like group chat to something that was previously just a one-on-one thing can't have been easy. I'm sure it's incredibly complex. They obviously missed something here. And I think it's more so Apple's response to the bug and the issue, and they're kind of fumbling of that is more of a problem in my eyes than the actual bug itself. The bug is obviously not good by any means. Right. The fact that the bug was up and running and working for as long as it was after it was reported to them is pretty bad.
Well, we're going to get to the reporting thing in a second because, yes, it was reported, but let's get to that in a second. I want to start, though, with how this was actually found.
It was a teenager.
Yay!
It wasn't a security professional. It wasn't a hacker. It was, not some nation state. As far as we know, it was a teenager. And they found it because they wanted to play some Fortnite.
Okay.
From the story we've heard from the teenager's mom on Twitter, and we'll get into the whole Apple response thing in a bit, as you said, but what happened was this teenager wanted to play some Fortnite with his friends. So he tried FaceTiming one of them to say, hey, you want to play some Fortnite? And his friend didn't pick up. And while that FaceTime call was still ringing, he's like, okay, well, I'll check with my other friend and I'll add him. And the minute he added a second friend to the FaceTime call, that's when it triggered the bug where he could hear the audio from the first person. Now, as we found out later on, you could just add yourself, but it looks like it was if you had added a third party and they had accepted, it was the same type of thing as occurred with how we saw the exploit working with just one person and trying to connect to another person. Now, I guess the potential here is that this bug has been in there since Group FaceTime was introduced, so a number of months. The fact that nobody noticed it till now kind of speaks to the fact that if you're available, you're most likely going to answer your FaceTime. And if somebody doesn't pick up right away, you're going to eventually give up and say, okay, they don't want to talk to me. So I think that's probably the only reason nobody noticed that before this.
Well, the other thing that was kind of weird when I was testing this, once I added myself to that call that I was trying to make to my friend, like FaceTime will usually ring for 30 seconds, 45 seconds before it's like, yeah, listen, you have to try again later.
on the phone. On the Mac, it goes for a while longer.
Okay. But then when I was trying it on the phone, because I was calling, it just kept ringing on my end. In other words, it didn't seem to do the whole thing where it was like, okay, nobody's going to pick up. But I guess maybe because I was talking to myself.
Yes, I think that might be the case.
Yeah, that's kind of this whole thing is kind of messy, and it's also kind of weird that a kid could just sort of stumble across it, and Apple's testing didn't find it for some reason. Now, initially, the only way that anybody knew to avoid susceptibility to the exploit was to kill FaceTime entirely, though that's no longer necessary. It's a Group FaceTime issue, and Group FaceTime is down, has been down, basically since Monday night, I think, which, of course, is part of Apple addressing the issue. Now, if this has you freaked out, you might consider an app that I think we mentioned several weeks ago. Back on checklist number 114, we were talking about a feature of MacBooks that were released in 2018, where closing the lid on those machines physically killed the mic on the machines. That Business Insider piece I read at the time said something that people might want to do for protection when using the Mac was installing apps that keep an eye on the microphone. There's no way to physically disconnect the microphone when a Mac laptop lid is open, the piece pointed out, but some Mac apps like Oversight can at least notify you if your microphone has been enabled without your knowledge. Is that overkill? And would that have done it in this case as well? That's the other thing.
Yes. I believe that Oversight would have worked in this case for the Mac. The issue, or at least let you know that I was trying to use your mic. I'm really torn on saying whether or not it's overkill. Oversight normally we recommend for people who are concerned that they're going to be the target of an attack either through malware or spyware. Mm-hmm. Your average user is not necessarily going to be targeted by nation states or anybody else looking to spy on them. I mean, that's the truth. However, given how easy this was to exploit, I don't know. Maybe it's not such overkill to install something like Oversight. I think personally, I think a feature like that should be built into FaceTime by Apple. The biggest problem I've had with this whole thing isn't so much that the bug happened or that Apple's response was pretty abysmal. It was that a third-party device is able to force your Mac or your iPhone to start leaking data and without your authorization or consent. So there's something in the client-side code that is like happily saying, okay, here's my audio and video, go ahead and take it. I don't know if that's going to Apple's servers and then going down to the various FaceTime group chat members, or if it is going directly from one FaceTime chat person to another. I'm not certain on how that works on Apple's side of things, but either scenario is not cool. I mean, either this data is going to Apple before you actually consent to send it, or or the capability is there, I should say, that something in the code can trigger it without you actually clicking OK. And that's a glaring security hole and not cool.
Now, of course, as I mentioned before, this isn't working at this point because Apple has taken down Group FaceTime and is working on it. What they issued Monday night was the statement they issued Monday night is, we're aware of this issue and we have identified a fix that will be released in a software update later this week, which sounded a bit lackadaisical. But then, Apple actually around 10:15, I think, Monday night on the East Coast, 7:15 on the West Coast, pulled down Group FaceTime. Apple's system status page since then has showed Group FaceTime as temporarily unavailable. Now, it's kind of comforting that they're on that they're working on it. And initially, when I wrote the story, I was like, oh, it's good that they got on this so quickly, except for the part where over a week before, somebody had sent a message to Apple, had sent a few messages to Apple, apparently saying, hey, this is a thing that happened. There was a Twitter user, MGT7, who Monday was following 27 people and had 7 followers. Had under 70 tweets, and they're weird tweets, and they're not InfoSec tweets. But of course, as Nick pointed out a moment ago, this was found by a kid, not by anybody in information security. What this MGT7 had posted on her Twitter account on the 20th of January, my team found a major security flaw in Apple's new iOS. He can listen into your iPhone, or iPad without your approval. I have video, submitted bug report to @AppleSupport, waiting to hear back to provide details. Scary stuff. #Apple, #bug report at Fox News, because apparently she also reported this to Fox News. As I say, this was posted on the 20th of January. We didn't hear about it until the 28th of January. Fox News didn't get back to her. Apple didn't get back to her. And honestly, it's not surprising that neither of those parties got back to her, because I got to figure both of them. Look, if this had been something that happened to me, if I had stumbled across this, I probably would have thought that I screwed something up. A lot of stuff that Apple gets is probably user error that people are freaking out about. At the same time, I mean, it's insane that somebody sent this to Apple. We know 8 days before it actually got, sort of wider notice. And as you pointed out, this has probably been a thing since the day FaceTime, Group FaceTime came out.
Yeah, and I mean, we've said it before on previous episodes that I personally like the security team at Apple. They are a great team, and when when they have the correct information, they're really quick with getting fixes out. The problem that we've mentioned previously is that getting a hold of the right people at Apple is not easy unless you have an inside contact there. There have been a number of times where we at SecureMac have actually gotten a hold of Apple to report malware that's made it to the App Store or similar issues that other people have been trying to report to them, but just did not have a loud enough voice. They didn't have the right contacts. They were getting lost in the noise. Apple and any other large company is going to be receiving tons and tons and tons of bug reports and security reports and people complaining about stuff every single day. And being able to triage that and figure out what's real and what's not, or what needs higher priority than other stuff, is not a simple task by any means. However, this lady bent over backwards to report this to Apple. She was trying different email addresses. At one point, Apple seriously had her sign up for a developer account to report it to the bug reporting system, the Radar, which is a developer thing for like, okay, there's a bug in the OS code and my code is triggering it. Not this case. This was not being triggered by code. This was totally on Apple's end of things. So, I mean, she shelled out $99 to join the developer program to report it. To me, I know that there are different teams at Apple. There are most likely different teams who are doing general bug reports versus security bug reports, and ones who are just focusing on, it's a UI issue rather than a data loss issue. And there are probably different systems on the back end for incident responses and bug reports and everything like that. The fact that this lady went through all these hoops and tried all these different avenues of getting a hold of Apple, and nobody at Apple at any of those different contact points said, hey, maybe we should escalate this, or hey, maybe I should send this to somebody up the chain to review a little bit. That's worrying, and I think it shows a bit of a disconnect in their internal systems as far as I guess a cohesion between, if a report comes in here, that the correct team is going to see it. And that is something that they will have to address, and I'm sure they will be addressing after this incident. But the fact of the matter is, due to, I think, their internal structure, this did not get to the right people in time. And then, of course, Apple reacts very quickly when there's bad press or bad media. And we went from seeing, we'll fix this later in the week to, okay, we're taking this offline tonight. Because it was a firestorm on Twitter. I was following it at the time, and it was pretty crazy. So I think, in that case, we've said before that there needs to be an easier and better way for security researchers, and in this case, the general public, to report issues to Apple, especially if they're of critical importance. And, Apple's got a lot of money, and they need to throw some at this problem, because it's not going to go away. The more market share you get, the more products you have, the more issues there are just going to be. And they need to have they need to not have this kind of situation happen again, because this is a pretty big black eye.
I'm not trying to defend Apple on this, but I'm just thinking about the complexity or the size of the whole thing. On Apple's earnings call earlier this week, they said that there are 1.4 billion active devices in their installed base. Doing a little math, a very little math, assuming that 3 of those devices are owned by each person, right? Assuming we're not talking about a 1-to-1, so you're not talking about 1.4 billion people. Assuming, though, that, one person owns 3 of those devices, you're still talking about 466 million people, which means Apple would need to be prepared to field information like this from 466 million people. Now, granted, we're not all going to find something at once. We're not going to jam them at once. And if we did, they would obviously know, okay, well, this is a serious thing. But how do you go from, I got a campus in Cupertino, got a campus in Austin, I got a couple of other places with a few thousand people ready to react as soon as somebody becomes the needle in the haystack that actually has something important to say.
And yeah, that is the problem is it is tricky to decide from the first point of contact whether or not a bug is a serious vulnerability or not. When you're running a bug bounty program or any sort of bug reporting, you're going to get reports that aren't even bugs. It's user error, or it's not significant, or it's really not an issue and it's supposed to be working that way. And yes, it takes time and effort to sort through all of those, but you kind of have to because you don't want situations like this happening. Now, as far as I'm aware, Apple's iOS bug bounty program is still invite only, so general members of the public can't just suddenly submit something to there. It requires special membership and participation. And as far as I'm aware, there still is no Mac bug bounty program whatsoever. Most other companies that do have bug bounty programs have them open to the public. They pay the money to hire employees to handle the volume of bug reports that come in, specifically because they're taking security seriously. And I really do feel very strongly that Apple should be following suit there. They should open up a Mac bug bounty program. They should make the iOS bug bounty program more widely available to people instead of just going with a small subset of insiders. But it does. It comes down to costing time, money, hiring the right people, making sure people are trained correctly. And those are all steps that I'm sure Apple will be considering as they move forward with this.
Originally, I asked Mr. Topchek to join me today because I wanted to talk about the whole, FaceTime group chat nightmare thing. And then, as we were preparing to do this show, because we're recording it Wednesday for Thursday release, as we're preparing to do this show, another Facebook explosion. And I should have realized that was going to happen because it was a day that ended in Y. Facebook seems almost vampiric at this point in their need for information or their willingness to let others mine your information. Of course, there's the Cambridge Analytica thing, but then there's another thing that Facebook was doing that's more closely tied to what happened this week. You may remember Onavo Protect. Facebook billed that as a VPN, and maybe it was, except for the private part. Rather than keeping your info away from prying eyes, Facebook actually skimmed information relating to where users went and what users did, which was easy because users were running all of their activity through Onavo's servers, which were, of course, Facebook servers. News of that broke last year. Apple banned the app in June of 2018 and removed it from the App Store in August of 2018. Now Facebook has done something just as bad, from Apple's perspective anyway. According to a piece from TechCrunch, since 2016, Facebook has been paying users ages 13 to 35 up to $20 a month, plus referral fees to sell their privacy by installing the iOS or Android Facebook Research app. Facebook even asked users to screenshot their Amazon order history page. The program is administered through beta testing services Applause, BetaBound, and UTest to cloak Facebook's involvement, and is referred to in some documentation as Project Atlas, a fitting name for Facebook's effort to map new trends and rivals around the globe. As for the kind of info Facebook is getting, we don't actually know what information they were taking, though what they had access to is kind of stunning. TechCrunch talked to Guardian mobile firewall security expert Will Strayfitch, who said if Facebook makes full use of the level of access they are given by asking users to install the certificate, they will have the ability to continuously collect the following types of data: private messages in social media apps, chats from in instant messaging apps, including photos and videos sent to others, emails, web searches, web browsing activity, and even ongoing location information by tapping into the feeds of any location tracking apps that may have been installed. It's unclear exactly what data Facebook is concerned with, says TechCrunch, but it gets nearly limitless access to a user's device once they install the app. So I think what this has to do with is what Strayfitch referred to as, once they install the certificate. What does that mean? What is that? And how does it give so much access?
Well, certificates are, they're kind of a way of showing that you trust a company or entity, and that you're giving them access to your data on a different level. A lot of certificates are used to basically make sure that there's security in place. You have, there are a number of certificates, root certificates, that are installed by default on every iPhone. They are from what are considered the trusted vendors or trusted entities. They make sure everything runs smoothly and securely in the background for the entire World Wide Web. So you'll have, your certificate from your bank, for example, is going to let you and your bank know that, hey, we're communicating directly with each other. There's not somebody using a man-in-the-middle attack. Our data is secure in transit. Normally, they're very, very good things. However, in a case like this, Facebook was taking advantage of I wouldn't say unknown feature of iOS, a lesser-known feature for the general public, which allows the end user, or the person who owns the iPhone or has the iPhone, to kind of circumvent the whole App Store review process, all the stuff that Apple does to keep your phone safe, and allows you kind of basically to install an app that is not verified by Apple, not necessarily trusted. They are saying, okay, you trust this company enough to install their certificate and install their app and let them have free reign on your phone to whatever degree. So it's putting the burden on the user then, instead of Apple kind of standing there to stand guard.
It reminds me a bit of what was going on. I don't know that we actually know that it was happening, but there was a story that came out towards the end of last year talking about the potential security risks of device management services. That's not the right acronym, but basically, if you use something, I don't want to name any names because I don't want to make it sound like any of these companies were up to something, but you could basically have a system where you're able to install a bunch of apps across your business, be it big or small. So let's use one that has to have it. Salesforce has to be running some sort of device management program where if they want an app on everybody's computer, they're not sending out something saying, okay, everybody, make sure you update this. It's just installed on their computer, and that's done through device management. I mean, it sounds sort of like a similar thing, except, well, I mean, while this type of data collection might be onerous as far as Apple's concerned, the way Facebook was getting the app installed actually violated Apple's rules. Rather than sending people to the App Store, Facebook was using Apple's Enterprise Developer Program to get iOS users to download a profile, giving them access to all of the information they want, and that's where the violation comes in. TechCrunch says an Apple spokesperson provided this statement: "We designed our Enterprise Developer Program solely for the internal distribution of apps within an organization. Facebook has been using their membership to distribute a data collecting app to consumers, which is a clear breach of their agreement with Apple. Any developer using their enterprise certificates to distribute apps to the consumers will have their certificates revoked, which is what we did in this case to protect our users and their data." Because, yeah, Apple's not playing. They have revoked Facebook's Enterprise Developer Program certificates, which means any legitimate apps that Facebook was using internally have stopped working. It's so, dude, I feel bad how good I feel about that. I know it's causing problems.
Hilarious.
I know it's causing a lot of problems for a lot of people who legitimately can't do their work right now, but
Honestly, I don't care. I think that's just desserts.
Well, I feel bad for them. I don't feel bad for the upper people in Facebook. I feel bad for the guy who's working. Because here's what kind of stuff we're talking about. This is from a piece from The Verge on Wednesday. A person familiar with the situation says that early versions of Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, and other pre-release dog food or beta apps have stopped working, as have other employee apps like one for transportation. Facebook, not surprisingly, is treating this as a critical problem internally, as the affected apps simply don't launch on the employees' phones anymore. So, you've been traveling for Facebook and you're supposed to come home and you use an iPhone and suddenly your travel app is not working. Or you're the guy who's responsible for the next build of Instagram. Not one guy, obviously, but that's not working. I mean, tons of stuff now is not working. I feel bad for the individual employees, but this is it's just dessert for Facebook.
I think that my hope would be, yes, I guess I do feel a bit bad for people who are unable to perform their jobs and tasks there. However, maybe the silver lining is that will be some inside pressure on Facebook to not pull this kind of trick in the future. I mean, that's pie in the sky, and I'm probably hoping for something that's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, probably next time they'll just use a different certificate that's not tied to their internal stuff.
Yeah.
But it was that was flaunting the most basic rules in a big way, and we see apps breaking rules in the App Store all the time, and Apple's kind of their enforcement of the rules is hit or miss depending on who it is. They allow some apps to do stuff that they don't allow other apps to do, and that's a bit of a point of contention in the developer community. But this one is pretty egregious. And from what I've heard from security chatter on Twitter is that Facebook is not the only company that's doing this. There are most likely others, not necessarily under the main company names, shell companies. So yeah, this is probably a bit of a widespread problem, and I'm hoping that Apple cleans house on this one.
Here's a question, though. How do they clean house on this? Because I will say the one thing that makes me feel good about this is that it's gone on since 2016. And I know you're saying, how does that make you feel good? Apple didn't know this was happening. And I still can hear people saying, okay, how does that make you feel good? Apple wasn't spying on what Facebook was doing, right? Facebook was doing this thing that you would think Apple might have picked up on it if there was, suddenly a growth, let's say, and how the certificates were being used. Except Apple sort of looks at businesses and say, okay, your business is your business. We have a code of conduct. Don't violate that code of conduct. We're going to trust you that you're not violating that code of conduct. It turns out they were violating that code of conduct for 2 years. The good news is Apple wasn't spying on them.
And that's very true. The whole point of an enterprise program like this is because Apple knows that in certain situations with businesses or schools or whatever, you're going to have times when you need to have a custom app that your employees are going to use that needs to do stuff that either you don't want a third party reviewing your code for, or it needs to do stuff that Apple wouldn't necessarily approve, or it needs to access private APIs, or all these different reasons. And the fact that Apple wasn't aware of that at first, when you had said that, I was like, what is Ken talking about? But yeah, I'm happy in that regard that Apple is staying hands off with regards to the enterprise software. They're not, or enterprise certificates and developer program. They're not kind of, saying, hey, are you what are you doing with it? Are you following the rules? They're not doing that. And in this case, Facebook, I think this temporary setback of their internal apps not working is going to be the least of their problems very shortly. So, yeah.
I hope you're right about that. Although, honestly, I think Zuckerberg and company have just like a stack of mimeographs that they can just change the date on, right? That begins, we've made mistakes, we've learned, we're growing. It's just like, just keep sending those out. I feel like we should all get one of those every day because it seems like something's happened with Facebook every day. Speaking of which, Facebook has confirmed all of this. They said early Wednesday afternoon that their internal apps are affected by Apple revoking their enterprise certificate. Meanwhile, Sarah Fryer, a tech reporter for Bloomberg, posted a message on Twitter saying that Facebook said that they are trying to negotiate with Apple right now. God, I wish I could be in that room.
I know, right?
I would love to be there for that. As far as what was actually being given away by people, though, is it possible that people were giving away this information, that they were installing these apps without knowing how much access they were giving away?
Most likely. I mean, if you think about it, most likely Facebook was covering their butts legally with a nice end user license agreement, probably, that the users had to sign. And somewhere in the 50 pages of legalese, it said something like, we're going to take all your data and you can't sue us for it. And haha, we're Facebook, bye. It probably was something similar to that. So it was there. Like, if you went looking for it and you understood how to read the end user license agreement and, went to law school for 4 years. And, but no, I mean, for the most part, these were teenagers. These were kids. They're getting $20 a month, which to me, I'm like, wow, that's really cheap for the data that Facebook was getting. If you talk about like $2,000 a month, maybe, but no, 20 a month, they probably was like, hey, cool, it's cash.
It's $20 a month for using your phone, which you're going to do anyway.
Exactly. And so I don't know if they understood what they were giving away. I guess the bigger question is, would they have even cared? A lot of the younger generations are growing up in a world where Facebook has always been around, or has been around for the majority of their computing and phone using lives. So they've gotten used to privacy being eroded every year, and that's really kind of a sad state of affairs. But I think that is the truth. I'm not sure how much they care. Maybe because they don't understand the full scope of it. If you told somebody straight up, hey, Facebook is reading every single message you're sending to your significant other and looking at all those pictures and everything else, yeah, people might care a lot more. But if they're getting this app or getting referred by their friends saying, hey, just install this app so Facebook can get a better idea of how us teenagers are, what the cool kids are doing these days, and you'll get $20 a month, yeah, I can see people not even stopping to think about it. Now, from Facebook side of things, I mean, I understand why they were doing this, even if I don't agree with it. A lot of the studies have shown that fewer and fewer teens are signing up for Facebook. They're going to different messaging apps. Facebook has become for the old fogies and people over 30 and everything like that. And so Facebook, they're going to want to kind of catch the next wave, and they need data in order to do that. But this was pretty much the worst way to go about it.
So I've got a teenager. I don't really, but let's pretend. I've got a teenager. I'm suddenly worried that this is something that's happened or this is something they've done. Is there an easy way for me to find out if they've, downloaded or installed one of these certificates or allowed this kind of protection or, this kind of access? Is there an easy way for me to find out whether or not they've done that? And then is there an easy way for me to undo it?
Well, the first would be to look and see if the app is installed. It won't work anymore anyway because they revoked the certificate. But as I said earlier, Facebook's most likely not the only one doing this. There are ways to check and see if you have third-party profiles on your iOS device. Now, I went to go look. There were somebody had posted a link to one of Apple's pages on how to check this, and I went on my own phone on iOS 12 point whatever, and it wasn't there. I did not see that section. I believe it is only present if you have installed an enterprise certificate on your phone or profile. So if you haven't, you won't see it. But Apple, and this was this document that Apple had posted was from September of 2018, so it was fairly recent. So this article that Apple posted was how to delete an app that has a configuration profile on your iPhone, iPad, or iPod Touch. As I said, this was posted back in September, at which point they had said, Apple has removed some apps from the App Store that install root certificates that could allow monitoring of your data. If you have one of these apps installed on your device, delete both the app and its associated configuration profile to make sure that your data remains protected. Now, I reached out to some other security researchers online to see if anybody had any idea what apps Apple was referring to, because that happened back in September. This Facebook thing happened now at the end of January 2019. Mm-hmm. And there weren't any specific apps that people were aware of, but it has been happening with a lot of the VPN software, stuff like that, basically to... it's the way that they kind of sidestepped the right way of doing things in order to get the data. And so Apple is aware that it happens. But again, obviously, they had posted this in September and were not aware of Facebook doing it at that time. So it goes to show that this is not a unique incident. So it would probably behoove everybody to double check this. So in order to check this, first of all, you need to know what the app is, which might not be that easy. But the normal way of uninstalling an app is just to on your iOS devices to touch and hold the icon until it jiggles and then tap the X to delete it. And if you, you'll see a message that says deleting the app will also delete its data. You go ahead and tap the delete button. Now, if the app has a configuration profile, which is the stuff in the background that's allowing the app to do stuff like grab all your data and send it to Facebook or whoever, this is the way Apple says to check it. Again, I could not find this section on my device, so it might only be present if you have a configuration profile installed. So if you don't see it, I think at this time it's okay to say you're safe. If you do see it, maybe double check. So you'd go to, on your iOS device, you would go to Settings, General, and then it's either called Device Management, Profile Management, or Profile and Device Management. I think it's named different things depending on the device. Not positive there. Apple was not clear. Then you would tap on the app's configuration profile. From there, you would tap Delete Profile. And if asked, you might have to enter your device passcode and then tap the delete button. Afterwards, you would need to restart your iOS device. Now, that actually, I just realized would be a way to find out if you have an app. So maybe kind of go the opposite direction, check for configuration profile first. If you see one that has an app listed and you don't recognize the app and you're sure that it's not something that your work requires or anything like that, yeah, go ahead and do some more research maybe and then delete it if you think it might be shady.
Let me say really quickly, I think you're right on this because I was part of a device management program in the past that did have that certificate. And then I got myself out of that device management program and deleted that certificate. And now I'm going back and following the steps that you're talking about. And I don't see that that section on here. I had also done it for, I guess, because test flight's another reason that you might find something like that. Like I had a friend who had an app and he asked me if I would test his app for him. So I, signed up to test flight. And so that did the same thing. Then one day, I guess about a year ago, I looked down at my phone and I was like, wow, why do I have all of those profiles in there that I'm not using? And so I cleared them out, and now I don't see a place for them anymore. So I think you're right. That would probably be a good way to find out if any of this is going on. And then the other thing that you point out is if you do use your phone for work, double check with IT.
Yeah.
And make sure you're not going to bork something they need you to do.
I kind of hope that Apple will update that document and let users know whether or not, if it's not there, that it means it's not there at all, that you're okay. Because we are going to have a number of users, I'm sure, or listeners who are parents and want to double check their kids' devices. And, as we said earlier, it's not just Facebook doing this. If we become aware of any of the other names of other companies or apps that are behaving badly, we will be sure to let our listeners know. At this time, we are only aware of the Facebook app, though, or the Facebook specific enterprise profile that is the issue.
I'll tell you the one thing that makes me sad about this whole story.
What's that?
It's the last time we're going to talk about Facebook, I'm sure, because they're going to have cleaned up their act now.
Oh, this will be the time.
Yeah, except I just got a piece of paper slid under the door. Oh, Facebook is sorry about what they did. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos and stuff like that, the place to go is SecureMac.com/checklist. You'll find notes there for this show, although I would imagine you won't find notes there for this show until next week because this show was seriously being written 5 minutes before we recorded. But for this show and for shows before and any show to come, SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.